Well, welcome back for those of us that took a look at that first module and did an activity and now on to the second part. For those of us that are just joining us, the context here as I offer within this blended learning experience, or as we look at this personalized learning experience or this digital learning experience, the context here is as we explore math and the struggles that individuals face with math, oftentimes why we go to that personalized or blended learning experience. We need to appreciate some of their attributes, their characteristics, what they bring to the table. And oftentimes, they're generic to what we know about struggling learners and those with disabilities. And I want to kind of continue element of that within this overall global issue of learning and also attention. And the purpose of the overview is, to me, several reasons, but the primary is that we don't appreciate where our learners are challenged. If we don't appreciate where they're struggling, then we're not going to appreciate the solutions that are necessary, and we won't appreciate the potential barriers that they may face with the product, the lessons, the experiences, the expectations we have for these individuals. And these barriers oftentimes are actually innate into or embedded into the very solutions we're offering that we think are more, technology-based solutions. And instead, they may be aligned with their inattention, their poor memory, their difficulty with language, their difficulty with symbols, their difficulty with visual processing information, their difficulty with the assortment of information and numbers, and some of the strategies that we employ may also be additional barriers. So again, this is a kind of continuation of that conversation, and specifically today, I want to focus in on this attention issue. Now, I am talking about individuals identified with ADHD, but I'm also talking about individuals that have poor attention. Now, if we look at estimates nationally, there are some estimates out there that 7% of the population, school-age population, regardless of identified, have attention issues. Some will argue even higher, definitely comorbidity, in that very often individuals that have some sort of learning challenge will also very, very likely have attention issues as well. Now, when we think about attention, often we think about the inattention, we think about impulsivity, we think about overall executive functioning issues that basically, because of these challenges, we're going to have an impact on working memory, we're going to have an impact on organization, planning, the ability to start a task, finish a task, and everything in between. So when we think about that, let's directly relate it to math. And let's take, for example, that very common not paying attention. When multiple steps are involved, it will result into mistakes. So individuals have trouble paying attention. Now, here the pay attention could be the key parts of the lesson where it's been introduced. It could be that they're unable to focus on the important details when completing a multiple step problem. It could be that they actually didn't understand how it was initially instructed. Then they get into the actual multiple step components and they have difficulty there and everything in between. On a math aspect, we'll definitely trouble recalling or using the math rules, the formulas, understanding the formulas, following the series of steps needed to solve the math problems. And in the process of solving the math problems, the poor inattention may result in the fact that either they've missed steps, they may actually get the correct answer, or they missed steps and they were doing the right math, but because of the missteps, the answer is incorrect. Now, it also goes into some of the basic elements of everything from the rules and the complexity of rules that the memory aspect is expecting. Now, some of these things you may be immediately saying, well, Sean, okay, fine. They don't know math facts. We can introduce technology like calculators and things of that nature. Fine. But there's other complexities of rules or aspects of steps or formulas that we just have an expectation that the individual will attend to. It's a memory issue, but it's an attention issue. It's also the attention to detail as they're going through it. It's their attention to detail for organization or structure or lack thereof. And because of that, these individuals will have challenges. Now, it could bleed into, as I mentioned a moment ago, in terms of learning. So it very well could be a language and learning, a language and structure, a language and organization. It could also be reflective into the memory. But where we're at is that these complexities, these expectations that are relying on attention, are relying on, okay, this individual has to be organized to complete this. This individual has to be structured to complete this. This individual will need to be able to embed the following formula to complete this. Well, that expectation we need to tease out at times and say, well, that's an organization task, and we have some individuals that have poor organization. So how do we address that organization barrier? Because really we want it to be a math task, not an organization task. Or we want it to be a math task, not a memory task. We want it to be a application of the formula, not whether or not they've memorized the formula. And that may be a bit of a challenge there, because is it about memory, or is it about the fact that they want them to understand the formula and apply the formula? And that gets tricky. Now, it's also in terms of vocabulary and elements of vocabulary and the language rules affiliated with that. That could also have an impact as well. And then the application of that. So it is a language and attention issue, although I'm leading with attention, it is fairly complex. So think about the fact that they may be missing steps, forgetting to bring down the remainder, considering the fact that they're not completing the problem because they can't recall the steps. There's definitely an element also, especially as we get older in math. Remember, these individuals are not all of a sudden inattentive. They're not all of a sudden turning on the switch to say they're impulsive. But rather, this is something that, in most instances, this is lifelong. Therefore, it's not going to disappear, but equally important, it's not something that they all of a sudden had when they came into your classroom. Where I'm going with this is there's going to be challenges, and there's going to be a history of challenges, and for the individual, this is going to be perplexing. This is going to be a bit frustrating. This is going to get to a point where they may be giving up much earlier than you think. Wait a minute here, we're at September. What are you giving up for? Well, no. This is something that's been going on for several years. It's not being addressed, and it's just adding up. And of course, then we have this impulsivity aspect, where an individual may be like, okay, don't worry, I know, I'm going to move forward, I want to be the first one done, or I just want to be done. And because of that impulsivity, they may have the organization and the like, but they're just simply going through very quickly. And that's another strategy we'll need to address. Now, with that thought, have a nice inattention exercise, or an exercise for you to take a look at here, just kind of pausing for a moment. But one of the things kind of as we go into from inattention to math anxiety, which I want to talk about here in just a moment, I want to get you, and we will at the end of this experience, get you feeling with some of these inattention issues and what this actually means to an individual that has inattention, and the kind of the sensory overload that might take place for an individual. So just pause and let you know that as we kind of move into this math anxiety, hopefully the activity that we have following this presentation will kind of reflect a little bit more about and get you feeling a little bit more about what it means to have some of these issues. Now, before we complete this next stage, I do want to talk about an element that is math anxiety. Now, individuals with learning and attention issues will have elements of math anxiety. Is it real? Yes, it is. Does it exist? Yes, it is. Is it across elementary, middle, secondary? Yes. Do some of the teachers that we actually have teaching math potentially have math anxiety? Yes. I think of a graduate student not too long ago that came to our program saying we'd really like to study in the area of special education. But by the way, I hear you have to take 18 hours of statistics. Does that involve math? I just don't like math. I'm serious. Very bright individual. Actually ended our program, but it was one of those, really? Let's have this conversation. But math anxiety is something that we definitely know is out there. It's it's a stress response to something that's very frustrating to individuals. It's an inefficiency that they basically have no control of, or they need to be able to address very specifically to be able to deal with. We know that the math processing center of what happens within our brain can be overwhelmed, especially if we have learning attention issues, where the math task is overwhelming the processes. We do see evidence of individuals shutting down in respect to that. And even when we're using deliberate processing strategies, we find that students suffer from, lack of a better word, hiccups when they're processing, and that results in an inability to think, communicate, recall, or proceed, which we've kind of coupled under this idea of math anxiety. Now, think of a traditional strategy where we have, okay, fine, we have input, we have this idea that within the filtering of the process, we're going to get into memory, we're going to get into short-term, long-term, basic learning intervention, basic, expectations. But there's a point in the processing challenge we know with individuals that are challenged with math anxiety that this strategy, or the typical strategy we're using, or even potentially a strategy we're using unique to the individual, may not work. The added stress will overwhelm. And so we need to be aware of it to be able to then strategize to address it. Now, some of you may know Jim Abbott, others of you may not. He played for the Yankees, Angels, White Sox, the Brewers. He was actually one of only 296 pitchers since 1876 to pitch a no-hitter. That's 2 per year. He had one of those, although I can't recall the year. But if you were seeing the glove there, the glove is covering a stump of an arm because it does not have a wrist hand. He instead had one arm complete and another arm that would be seen as a stump, for lack of better words. Why am I sharing this? Well, what we know with individuals that worry and have anxiety when it comes to math quizzes, math tests, is the fact that they don't necessarily understand or see the connection that effort equals outcome. Where Jim Abbott, clearly, he put a lot of effort in and got a very positive outcome. This doesn't seem to apply to a lot of individuals with learning attention issues. They don't understand necessarily the connection between I put in this effort, it leads to this test outcome. I put in this effort, it leads to this quiz outcome. And or they're putting in that effort and they're not having the results due to math anxiety and the stressors when it comes to assessment, specifically when it comes to tests and quizzes. But the big thing here is they're not necessarily equating that effort equaling to outcome. That's something we'll need to intervene on. Another element is that we need to be aware of is that we might find the individual, unlike some other individuals that we talked about with learning attention issues, individuals with math anxiety may very well go through the homework fairly easily. They may answer most of the problems. We may say, oh, they're doing quite well here. But then they get anxious when it comes to the tests, so they make errors. They don't focus on the details. They don't follow the steps that we see them doing in the homework. We may even question, my goodness, who's doing your homework? Because you're not certainly sharing it on the tests. And that's overall math anxiety as well. So your child may find, well, we may find children avoiding going to math class or avoiding going to math class when there's quizzes or tests. We take a look and go, lots of different absences. Mom or dad starts to realize, lots of different illnesses. Again, they may get good grades in the homework, but it's not applying over to the tests and quizzes as a good indicator of potential math anxiety. Thinking of a math anxiety is kind of thinking of a physically able hiker who worries about what might happen as he tries to climb the peak. And so all that self-doubt, all that anxiety leads to, basically gets in the way of the success. So they're able to, there's nothing physically reducing their ability to succeed, and yet the reality is they're not able to succeed. So again, bring this up when we think about this, personalized or blended aspect of the math we're trying to offer the individuals that clearly are coming to us because they're struggling. We need to think of the attention issue and its application to what we might see as an outcome, but also the math anxiety and the potential math anxiety. Now, there's a video that is a resource that's for consideration that an individual will walk through, an expert actually in this area. That's one of my resources. Actually, I have a couple videos. I want you to at least consider those. They'll walk you through some more of the brain-based research and how they've definitely done scans to indicate that this is real. It's not something made up, and it's something very relevant to a group of individuals with learning and attention issues. Hope this was helpful.